As I've said, I think that all religions are wrong in the same way, in that they privilege faith over reason, but they're not all equally bad in the same way all the time. I mean, if I'd been writing in the 1930s, I would certainly have said that the Roman Catholic Church was the most dangerous religion in the world because of its open alliance with fascism and anti-Semitism, which the damage from that our culture has never recovered from and never will. But at the moment, it's very clear to me that the most toxic form that religion takes is the Islamic form. The horrible idea of wanting to end up with Sharia, with a religion-governed state, a state of religious law, and that the best means of getting there is jihad, holy war, and that Muslims have a special right to feel aggrieved enough to demand this, I think is an absolute obscene wickedness, and I think their religion is nonsense. And
in its
entirety. The idea of God speaks to some illiterate merchant warlord in Arabia, and he's able to write this down perfectly, and it contains the answers to all human. Don't waste my time. It's bullshit.
But you're saying the same about it.
Also, that God speaks. The Archangel Gabriel speaks only Arabic, it seems.
I just want to say, in retrospect, you were very civil, actually. I don't know what I was thinking.
Is this
the same characterization of all religions?
Well, actually, no, because remember, Islam makes one special claim for itself. All religions claim to be revealed truth. They all are founded by divine revelation. But Islam rather dangerously says, ours is the last and final one. There can't be any more after this. This is God's last word. Now, that's straight away a temptation to violence and intolerance, and if you note, it's a temptation they seem quite willing to fall for.
What does Christianity say? Those laws can be suspended, and in your favor too, if you make the right prayers and propitiations and sacrifices. There can be, a virgin can conceive, a dead body can walk again, your leprosy can be cured, the blind can see. Nonsense. It's not moral to lie to children. It's not moral to lie to ignorant, uneducated people and to tell them that if they will only believe nonsense, they can be saved. It's immoral. Not until gentle Jesus, meek and mild, are you told, if you don't make the right propitiations, you can depart into everlasting fire. That one of the most wicked ideas ever preached, and one that's ruined the lives and the peace of mind of many, many children, preached to them by vicious, child-hating old men and women in the name of this ghastly cult, which we're met here to discuss tonight. I don't need 2 minutes to finish with this religion, but thanks. In order to believe the Christian message, you have to believe this. For those 100,000 years, people were born, died, usually, many of them, in childbirth, either the mother or the child. At life expectancy, perhaps 20 years, 25. Died of microorganisms they didn't know existed. Genesis doesn't mention them because the people who write Genesis don't know there are microorganisms. Earthquakes would have been terrifying. Tsunamis, volcanoes, mysterious events. War and famine superimposed on this. You can all fill out this picture for yourselves, I'm sure. That was our life. For tens of thousands of years, on and on it went. Maybe a gradual upward curve of a sort. We seem to have made some progress, very painfully, and with infinite suffering and labor, and with our solidarity still intact. Now here's what you have to believe. You have to believe that heaven watched that for 98,000 years. And after 98,000 years decided 2,000 years, it may be time to intervene. And the best way of doing that would be to have a filthy human sacrifice in a very remote part of Palestine. And the news of this has still not penetrated to the rest of the world, and I don't think will be believed when it does, and isn't believed by me and can't be believed by a thinking person.
But he devoted his life to his religion. Do you have nothing good to say about him at all?
No, I repeat, Jerry Falwell lived on hatred and superstition and bigotry. He preached dislike of people whose lives he knew nothing about. He raised money from credulous fools.
You don't know anything about his life.
Now, excuse me, sir. You can either ask me on and ask my opinion, or you may not. But I don't have to be here if you're going to take that attitude.
Well, you could leave.
You spent the first half by saying I had no right to the opinion you'd asked me on to express. Now, you're tiring me out. I repeat, though.
No, what I said is your opinion was thoughtless. What you wrote was crude and mean and hateful. That's what I said.
You took up all the time for my answer with your long, rather unlettered question.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Falwell made a career out of sponsoring dislike and superstition, said that people he didn't like were going to hell, said the United States deserved to be attacked by Islamic fascists, said he believed that people would be raptured into heaven, leaving all the rest of us to wallow behind. I think his death is a deliverance. And if you say that someone who occasionally makes a charitable donation is a good person, then you have to say that Hamas and Hezbollah, who do all this charitable giving and charitable organizing, are the same.
In a country that celebrates it, Ralph Reed.
Sean, you know, look,
and why not a word now from the friend of Jack Abramoff?
Wait, we only have a moment here, Ralph. Here's an important question about. Well, let me get Ralph in here. Here's an important question
about
Jerry Falwell.
That's all it needs now.
Ralph,
let's hear from the Abramoff faction.
We only have a moment left. Ralph gets to speak
rip-off artists. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Hold on, Christopher.
Religion is our first. That's why I'm so fascinated with it. It's our first version of the truth. It's our first attempt as a species. It's what we tried when we didn't know anything. We didn't know we lived on a spherical planet. We didn't know that our planet revolved around the sun. We didn't know that there were microorganisms that explained disease. We thought diseases came from curses or witches or ill-wishing or devils or dust devils. We didn't know anything from the childish, terrified, ignorant origins of our animal primate species. We come to religion. It's also our first attempt at philosophy, our first attempt at morality, our first attempt at healthcare, actually, but because it was our first, it is our worst. We now have better explanations for all these dreads, and we have cleared up all of these mysteries, yet we still dwell. And in some countries, in some societies, not just dwell, but live under a totalitarian regime that forbids us to think about the progress that has been made or denies us the knowledge that these advances have in fact occurred. So it has become, where once it probably was an aid to our survival, a really great peril to our continued ability to live as a civilized species.
The argument about global warming, it seems to me, is not whether there is any warming, but whether or not human activity, or to what extent human activity is responsible for it. My line on that is we should act as if it is. For this reason, which I borrowed from Jonathan Schell's book on the nuclear question, the fate of the Earth. We don't have another planet on which to run the experiment. We can't find out but one way. And just as we don't have the right to run an experiment in nuclear exchange on this planet, because it doesn't belong to us to that extent, we've no right to run an experiment in warming on it either. And if it turned out to be that there was no severe global warming threat, or that it wasn't man-made, then all we would have done would be make a mistaken analysis, which we could correct for. But if it turned out that there was and we'd done nothing about it, then it would be too late to do anything at all, and that would lead to disaster. I have been told, though, and I'm afraid to say I think it may be true, that the warming is coming now whatever we do. That by the time we found out about the coming rise in temperature, that it was probably on its way. I've heard a lot of people who strongly take the Al Gore thesis, the Al Gore analysis, say that, alas, we're going to find out what it's going to be like no matter what we do. I think for two reasons. One is religion is the most interesting subject of all. I mean, if you have a friend or an acquaintance, you know an awful lot about them, depending on whether they attribute their presence in the studio to the laws of biology, the laws of nature, the laws of evolution by natural selection, or whether they think that they're here because of a divine plan. It's a big difference, philosophically, morally. And so going into this means you raise all the most interesting, all the most fundamental, basic questions. That's the first thing. So it's never a boring discussion. And second, or it shouldn't be, and the second is that at the moment, if you open the newspaper and see how the parties of God are behaving around the world, everywhere from Russia to Iran to even certain parts of the United States where they think they ought to influence the education system, that people are, I think, becoming fed up with being pushed around by ordinary mammals who think that they are better than us because they have God on their side. Enough with this. It's very insulting, it's very threatening, it's very stupid.
Are you a Christian?
I'm not.
What are you?
I'm not a member of any church. I don't think that there's any supernatural guidance. And
here's the article, by the way.
I don't think my presence here is attributable to any form of divine intervention.
What did you make of the story?
I thought it was a sad little story.
Why?
Well, someone who's getting a bit old and a bit silly and perhaps lacking for attention, and who I would have thought it would have been content with being born once, which is all that in fact she's ever going to be. Or any of us are. We're only going to be born once. So all this born-again stuff just gets me down, gives me a pain.
Says in this article, I'm extremely impressed with the genuineness and the sincerity in her search for spirituality and wholeness. The Reverend Gerald Durley, pastor of the Providence Missionary Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Miss Fonda has attended services, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I think she's found a certain sense of peace among people who found peace with Christianity.
So hard to object to, isn't it? You know what I think what I don't like, well, there's a lot of it I don't like, as well as finding it totally intellectually and morally unconvincing, is that this is the form that they believe modesty should take. It's going around all the time about how you've found God and how God has a special purpose for you. And this is construed as humility. It seems to me the height of immodesty to say that you've been chosen in this way or selected, or that you could possibly know that you had been. It's arrogant and conceited. Racketeering is and always has been an important part of religion. Some religions simply are rackets. Scientology, for example, or Mormonism. It's nothing more than the record of a successful con job. But the spiritual life can't be entirely reduced to that, and here's the problem. When you ask, do people really believe that? There can't be an answer to it, because they don't know any more than you do whether there was a virgin birth or a resurrection. If they say, I believe it, they're still believing in something that they have to know very probably didn't take place. So what are they asking us to believe? They're asking us to believe their propensity to faith, in other words, to take something on faith without argument or evidence. Well, if somebody wants me to believe that of them, that they will do that, then I will, but I feel that they're arguing against themselves. You're of course quite right that on the 11th of September 2001 we were forced yet again, as we are all the time, to confront the fact that faith by itself doesn't deserve respect, as we keep saying it does, that faith on its own is another form of fanaticism or substitution of belief for reason, and that's a sign of what a poorly evolved primate, mammalian species we are. The rabbi earlier appeared to pour contempt on the idea that we should think of ourselves as animals. Well, again, evidence counts, ladies and gentlemen. We are half a chromosome away from being chimpanzees, and don't you think it shows? Yes, of course we are animals. We're I think, a qualitatively as well as quantitatively better primate, but primates is what we are, and we know it. We even have the DNA to absolutely establish it. Nothing to be proud of or ashamed of, but a fact not to be denied. Now, we're lucky that there were people on one of those planes who didn't pray at all. They got out of their seats and they said, we're not going to let this plane fly into the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. But it's not all bad news, because it does mean that those who crash planes full of living people into buildings full of living people, shouting that God is great and believing it's going to get them to paradise, aren't going to get there.
About that,
one is only sorry. One is only sorry, and very sorry in my case, that there's no moment, at the moment of their extinction, there's no moment when they think, ah, damn, it isn't. But wishful thinking can't help that either. So my settled consideration, verdict on this is, they want to die, and I'm here to help them do so. And so should you be, and everyone in this room should be ashamed until they've done something to kill at least one jihadist or bring about the physical and moral and political and military defeat and humiliation of these people. And the God in which they believe. And the non-existent deity in which they dare to take permission to try and kill us all.
Christopher, have you ever prayed?
Once for a hard-on. In the ordinary moral universe, the good will do the best they can, the worst will do the worst they can. But if you want to make good people do wicked things, you'll need religion. Now, I've got now 1 minute and 57 seconds.
to say why I think this is very self-evident in our material world. Let me ask Tony again, because he's here, and because the place where he is seeking peace is the birthplace of monotheism. So you might think it was unusually filled with refulgence and love and peace. Everyone in the civilized world has roughly agreed, including the majority of Arabs and Jews and the international community, that there should be enough room for two states, for two peoples in the same land. I think we have a rough agreement on that. Why can't we get it? The UN can't get it. The US can't get it. The Quartet can't get it. The PLO can't get it. The Israeli Parliament can't get it. Why can't they get it? Because the parties of God have a veto on it, and everybody knows that this is true. Because of the divine promises made about this territory, there will never be peace, there will never be compromise. There will instead be misery, shame, and tyranny, and people will kill each other's children for ancient books and caves and relics. And who is going to say that this is good for the world? And that's just the example nearest to hand. Have you looked lately at the possibility that we used to discuss as children in fear? What will happen when messianic fanatics get hold of an apocalyptic weapon? Well, we're about to find that out as we watch the Islamic Republic of Iran and its party of God allies make a dress rehearsal for precisely this. Have you looked lately at the revival of Tsarism in Putin's Russia, where the black-cowled, black-coated leadership of Russian Orthodoxy is draped over an increasingly xenophobic, tyrannical, expansionist and aggressive regime? Have you looked lately at the teaching in Africa and the consequences of it, of a church that says AIDS may be wicked, but not as wicked as condoms? That's exactly no seconds left, ladies and gentlemen. I've done my best. Believe me, I have more.